Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Dearborn High School. I'm truly honored to stand before you on this special day. Let me begin by introducing the Color Guard representing the Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 267, who will lead us in the presentation of the colors. Gentlemen.
Ready, post. Please remain standing as we say the pledge. Please place your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will you please remain standing while they sing the national anthem? Is that now? And salute.
Thank you, Color Guard and Ms. Atkins, for the men and women's ensemble. I'd like to acknowledge some special guests in attendance today. First and foremost, would all the representatives of armed forces, past and present, please rise. Thank you. I'd also like to recognize Mayor Jack O'Reilly. Also, Superintendent of Dearborn Schools, Dr. Glenn Maleyko. We have some school board members with us today, Mr. Jim Thorpe, Mary Petchlikoff, and Hussein Burry. And some of you may recognize the lady on the right there, our Executive Director of Student Achievement for Dearborn High, Ms. Shannon Peterson. I also want to thank our guest speakers, Ms. Lisa Lark. Lisa? and Art Garrison. Also want to say thank you to Ms. Nazreen Corelli and Mr. Matt Schleif in the Social Studies Department for your assistance in organizing this ceremony, as well as our student speakers who you'll be hearing from shortly, and to Westbourne Market for the beautiful wreath. And finally, students, I'd like to welcome you. I'm honored to stand before you today. The purpose of this ceremony is twofold. We're here to honor our past and educate our future. Memorial Day, which is celebrated on the last Monday in May across the United States, is a day reserved to remember the sacrifices made by our service members in defense of our great nation. We are here today to honor the memories of Dearborn High School pioneers that gave their lives in service to our country. Throughout its history, Dearborn pioneers have answered the call to serve. Its sons and daughters have been sent to faraway conflicts never to return. These pioneers had courage, they had pride, they loved their families and their communities, and they were willing to risk their lives so that way we can live in peace. Please listen to the words and stories that you will hear this morning. I ask that you take some time this weekend to think about what your fellow pioneers were asked to do, the sacrifices that they made, the lives that they did not get to live so that we could enjoy freedom. At this point, I'd like to welcome Alex Restum, who will begin our ceremony. Alex.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Alexandre Restum, and I'll be your Masters of Ceremonies for this afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here and honor all of those who have made the ultimate sacrifice to help secure the blessings of liberty this country was founded upon. I'd like to first introduce our keynote speaker, Dearborn Mayor John B. O'Reilly.
You have some wonderful speakers today, and I'm just going to try and give a little bit of a beginning, and then they'll get into the real deep end. But, this is where every year that we honor those people who paid the ultimate sacrifice. And so we're distinguishing, there's many events, especially in Dearborn, there are a lot of events that we conduct related to our veterans and recognition of those who've done a lot for our community. But those who gave up their life is what we're talking about. And the interesting thing is that all wars are not equal. They just haven't been and they'll never will be. And I know my father was in World War II, and there was a sort of, everyone was on board. It was, we're going to support this. They'd seen it coming for some time. Then he went back in Korea. And Korea was a very different war. And in some cases, the people back home weren't paying a lot of attention to it, and it didn't have any relationship to the war that had just ended not long before. And then, of course, I was in the group that we had a lot of disagreements about whether or not we belonged overseas, whether or not that war really had merit. But that's all things that are distracting from the real issue. The real issue is that as part of this great democracy, all of us have a duty to support the democracy. We have the right to say we don't agree with this, we don't agree with that, but at the end of the day, we are part, and we can't just select out and say, well, I'll pick this part, that part. And that's what we're talking about, is these people answered the call. Even if they weren't sure or didn't agree with what it was, they said, I'm going to trust my government. I'm going to do what I'm asked to do because that's my duty. And they did it. And so, again, many of them went, and at that time, there wasn't a lot known about what was going on overseas. And so there were people who went over, and they really didn't understand what the war was about or what they were going over to fight for. But they did it. And that's the idea that we talk about in a democracy. We have to be prepared to do what must be done to protect our democracy, to protect it. But it doesn't mean that we have to say that we agree 100% wholeheartedly that what's being done is right in our mind. It's that we have the right to say what we believe. But at the end of the day, it is up to us to do what must be done according to the people that we've trusted to make those decisions. And that's not easy. because all of us have our opinions. All of us have ideas about what we think should or shouldn't happen. But at the end of the day, we must be unified. We must be together. And again, we have to meet the call. And that's what we're talking about today, is those people who said, I'm going to do this because this is what my country wants of me, needs of me, in order to be safe. And again, these were not easy times. I lived through it with my friends, others, and it was challenging. But the point was that if we begin to say that we can pick or choose when to follow the government and when not, well, we all lose in the end. So we are reminded here that these people, without reservation, did what was asked of them, and they made a sacrifice in many cases that was their whole life, literally. And today, and you're going to hear about that, I think, a little bit later, but we still don't know what happened to so many of them, and we don't know where the remains are. We don't know a lot about what happened. But when we're celebrating, this 2 days from now, when we celebrate their courage, when we celebrate their willingness to put their life on the line, and many of them, today, in today's Army and most of what you know, people volunteer to go. They go because they go and say, I'm willing to, sign up. But at that time, what was happening to my colleagues were there was no choice. You had numbers. And literally, they gave designated numbers for everybody that was eligible, and then if your number came up, you went to war. So it was a very different time. It was a very different set of circumstances, but we're saying that we are proud of them because they did what was asked of them. They followed that, and in the end, well, we are better off for it as a community and as a nation. So that's what it's all about. It's about saying not the underlying of what were we doing and why are we doing it. It's the fact that people said, I'm ready, I'm going to do what's asked of me, I'm going to do it because I'm part of this great nation. And that's what we have to make sure that we're focused on, and that's what we've got to do year after year to remind ourselves that that's how democracy works. Thank you.
Thank you for those words, Mr. Mayor. Next up, I'd like to introduce Dr. Glenn Maleyko, Superintendent of Dearborn Public Schools, for additional remarks about the importance of this day of remembrance.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate that, and I've known him a long time, going back to our Duval days, right? So, good afternoon, students, staff, honored guests, military, board members. This is a very important day. And as I was driving home and thinking about how nice it would be to have an extra day off, a little more time to relax, maybe get some work done in the yard, and or maybe a barbecue with friends. We all know that the weather hasn't been great this spring, if we did get a spring at all. There's nothing wrong, though, with enjoying our holidays. In fact, it's important for our own health to be able to unwind, slow down a bit, and spend time with family. However, it's even more important to make sure we do not forget the meaning behind these very special holidays, and to make time to honor those who paid the ultimate sacrifice, as the mayor said, so that we can enjoy these days. That is what Memorial Day is all about. In November, we have a day to pay tribute and thank our veterans, those who have served in the armed forces. But Memorial Day is different. This weekend, we pause with reverence and to respect and honor those who gave their life while serving in the military. We owe it to those fallen heroes and their families to never forget the true meaning of Memorial Day. Many who died while serving in the armed forces were at the very start of their life. They had plans, dreams, and hopes, just like many of you. They were looking forward to a future filled with friends and family. They were the next police officers, scientists, engineers, and teachers. Like many of you, I too have had family members serve in the armed forces. My grandfather, who passed away in 2012, served in the U.S. Navy in World War II. I heard many stories from him, and he was very, very, extremely proud that he served his country. I'm fortunate that I was able to hear those stories firsthand directly from my grandfather. On Memorial Day, however, we must also remember the families who were never able to hear those stories firsthand because their loved one was lost while serving their country. Let them know that their family member is appreciated and remembered. Let them know that the ultimate sacrifice, the price that was paid for our continued freedom, will not be forgotten. President Franklin Roosevelt said, "Those who have long enjoyed such privileges as we enjoy forget in time that men have died to win them." So this weekend, enjoy the days off, spend time with family and friends, maybe grab a blanket or a lawn chair and make your way to the big parade on Michigan Avenue. I plan to be there. But always remember the true meaning of Memorial Day. Remember the mothers, daughters, sons, and fathers who served our country and gave their life defending our freedom. Thank you, and God bless our fallen, our veterans, our active military, and this great nation, the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Maleyko. Next up, I'd like to introduce Miss Lisa Lark, who is an author and former Dearborn Public Schools student and teacher, to share her thoughts about the significance of this day.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you all for coming today and for giving us your attention as we honor these men and women who gave their lives. From its earliest days, Dearborn has had a strong connection to the U.S. military. Our city was named after a hero of the American Revolution, and for 40 years in the 19th century, Dearborn was home to a military arsenal, of which 3 buildings still remain. The Dearborn area has long sent its sons and daughters off to war in service to their country, our country. Dearborn High School students have given their lives in service since World War I. What I'd like to talk to you about today is who these men and women were. As Dr. Maleyko said, they were just like you. They walked these very same hallways. They came to school down these very same streets, although their cars were probably just a little bit different than the ones you came in today. They went to the same parks, some of the same city pools, even were in the same classrooms, maybe even lived in the same houses. These were people that shared with you more in common than you realize. They played sports. They might not have played Etzel, but they probably played Fortson. They probably looked forward to that game all year. They had homework. They had classwork. They had friends. They had fights with their parents and fights with their girlfriends. They went off to a war that was thousands of miles away from home. For most of them, that was probably the first time they'd been on an extended trip away from their family and their friends, and they took it to go to war. The things that they saw were things that no one should have to see: death and pain and destruction, let alone to see them at such a young age so far from home. So today, as we honor these men and women, as we think about who they were when they were here, think not only about the fact that they sacrificed for our country and for our freedoms, but think about the lives they lived before they died. Think about the places they went, the things they might have dreamed about, the hopes that they had for their future. Think about them not just today, but every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lark. Next, Dearborn High School students will be taking a moment to recognize 4 fallen heroes from the city of Dearborn who gave their lives in defense of our nation and its values. First up, I'd like to introduce Kareem Hazimi and Ava Murhi, honoring Sergeant Walter Blankertz.
World War I, also known as the First World War, the Great War, and the War to End All Wars. Whatever it may be known as, it is one familiar to all. This fierce conflict engulfed the entire globe, those from every race, ethnicity, and religion. It involved 32 countries, it was on 5 continents, and it took the lives of nearly 20 million people all around the world. The impact of the war's violence created waves that even reached Dearborn. One of our very own pioneers, who graduated in the early 1910s, Walter Blankards, made the ultimate sacrifice for his country and its people.
He is the only known World War I service member from Dearborn to lay down his life in service of our freedom. Sergeant Blankards of the 120th Machine Gun Battalion was tragically killed in action on the 1st of August, 1918, while performing his duties in a French-American counteroffensive against the Germans in France. Such a noble service is reserved for the bravest of us all. Men and women, like Blankards, are the epitome of American heroes. Every day, these men and women stand guard in anticipation, ready to defend and protect our great country. Thank you.
Next up, I'd like to introduce Zainab Al-Momin and Bayan Yahya, who will be speaking about Staff Sergeant Robert Burry.
When World War II broke out, the American people worked collectively in support of the war effort. Dearborn was no exception to this, as many of our own students here at Dearborn High School joined our armed forces to serve and protect our country. Unfortunately, 37 of these former students died in service. We stand here today to honor our fallen soldiers. One of these soldiers that had a great impact on our community was former Dearborn High School student, Staff Sergeant Robert Burry. Due to the financial hardships faced by his family, he was encouraged to leave school and seek employment when he was only a sophomore. Sergeant Burry served the Civilian Conservation Corps at the young age of 16, and 2 years later, took his first opportunity to enlist into the Air Force. Excelling as a pilot, Staff Sergeant Burry received many posthumous medals, including the Air Medal and 4 Oak Leaf clusters, for the bravery and dedication he exhibited during the war. He served as a lion-hearted lead bomber pilot with 8 units and 4 aircraft in 2 years, and until he died in a tragic accident caused by the poor weather conditions on the way back from a mission. In addition to not seeing his 23rd birthday, he would also never get to meet his son, born only 1 month after his death. The calamities he and those who fought with him endured managed to devastate an entire nation, but the sacrifices made by Staff Sergeant Burry did not die when he did. Years later, Burry's acts of bravery inspired his grandson, Raymond Brim, to join the Air Force as a pilot. The determination brought by Dearborn's own warrior not only influenced the minds of those who were close to him, but the minds of many in our community. Let us all join together in honoring the legacy of those lost but never forgotten. The next time you look up at the blue horizons, keep in mind the young pilot who sacrificed his all for our country. Thank you.
Now, Private First Class Alexandre Puccini will now be honored by students Miriam Amon and Jacob Lambert.
In 1950, Dearborn High junior Alexandre Puccini was drafted into the U.S. Army and was sent to serve in the Korean War. Throughout the short amount of time Puccini served, he was consistently met with adversity, being wounded 2 times, though he persevered and returned to serve even after sustaining both wounds. Unfortunately, his resilience was not enough to prevent his own death. On February 23, 1951, several months before he would have graduated, Alexandre Puccini was killed at the age of 18 by a hostile while in South Korea.
Today we are here gathered to memorialize individuals such as Alexandre Puccini. But far too often, we don't truly attempt to see these people from their perspectives. We will never be able to fathom the hardships, the adversities, the horrors that these people have witnessed and experienced.
Today, we have become desensitized to the experience of Alexandre Puccini. We just see him as another soldier who served, who died. Once we complete our moral obligation to recognize them, we simply go back to living our own lives. We return to taking the good in our lives for granted. We return to not recognizing the value of the opportunities life provides us. We return to disparaging every day we get.
We stand here today within the purpose of asking you to remember those that have sacrificed their lives for our safety, to remember that there are people serving our great nation as we speak. Ultimately, appreciate those such as Alexandre Puccini, who were never able to experience things like graduating high school or pursuing a higher education, but rather had their lives cut short protecting others who had such privileges. We stand here together as a community and as a nation because of brave men and women like Alexandre Puccini.
Lastly, I'd like to introduce Latifa Shihab, who will be honoring Captain James Huard.
The Vietnam War began November of 1955. At that same time, James Linton Huard was a 5th grade student at Huard Elementary School, just like so many of us once were. From there, he went on to Bryant Middle School and then Dearborn High School. Here at Dearborn High, he participated in basketball, choir, and track. After graduating from Dearborn High in 1964, he attended Central Michigan University, where he became a teacher and ultimately came back to teach in Dearborn Public Schools. But soon thereafter, he decided to pursue his dream of becoming a fighter pilot in the U.S. Air Force. In July of 1972, Captain James Huard's F-4E Phantom disappeared over North Vietnam, and for nearly 25 years, his remains were not found. Finally, in January of 1997, Huard's remains were recovered and identified, and he was finally returned to his family. He had left behind his wife, Cynthia, and his 3 boys, Paul, Pete, and Daniel. On May 1st, 1999, Dearborn dedicated a memorial in Huard's honor that reads, "In the Quest for Freedom." At that same time, the drive in front of Dearborn High was renamed James Huard Drive in honor of his sacrifice. Today, we remember James Huard not only as a son, a husband, a father, a teacher, a pilot, a hero, but also as a pioneer. Thank you.
Thank you to all the students who shared their thoughts and feelings about our fallen heroes. Now it's my honor to introduce Art Garrison, a DHS alumnus, Dearborn resident, and Army Specialist 5th class, to talk more about the fallen heroes of this nation.
Well, good afternoon, pioneers. I greet all the students, faculty, and our honored guests. I've been asked to return this year from the Memorial Day program to go into greater detail regarding Dearborn High School's heroes. These men are heroes because they made the supreme sacrifice for their country. Memorial Day is a solemn occasion when we give thanks and celebrate our, celebrate our heroes' dedication, courage, and bravery. Hey, I broke out crying last year. I'm doing better. Bear with me, please. As I said last year, they served, they fought, and they died, and received neither their country's glory nor compassion for their deeds. Here's where it gets tough. It's like a religious experience for me because I went to school with these gentlemen, these heroes. So please bear with me. Sergeant First Class James Barnett Patterson was in the U.S. Army. He was a Special Forces group over there,
or a Green Beret. He won the Silver Star, Combat Infantry Badge, Purple Heart, Good Conduct Medal, National Defense Ribbon. James was a career soldier. He joined the Army in 1953 and died in 1967, so he'd been in the service for 14 years. Next, Private First Class James Barrett Brock for the U.S. Army. He was a member of the 1st Infantry Division. He won the Combat Infantry Badge, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, and National Defense Medals. He entered the service in May of 1967, and he was drafted. Next is Sergeant James Stewart Hath of the U.S. Army. He was a member of the Americal Division. He also had the Combat Infantry Badge, Purple Heart, and National Defense. He entered the service August of '67, and he was drafted. His residence was on Mayburn Street, 1 block west of Telegraph, and that ties him to our next hero and gentleman who I sat next to at Bryant Junior High in Dearborn here. Sergeant Larry Louis Gambino, U.S. Army. He was with the 4th Infantry Division. He won a Silver Star. He had a Combat Infantry Badge. He had a Purple Heart and National Defense Medal. He entered the service September of '67. He was drafted, and he lived down the street from James Hath on Mayburn Street. Next is 1st Lieutenant Thomas Henry Gentine. He was in the U.S. Army. I knew him, of course. He attended back then, after they closed Dearborn High and moved it to this location. They had a junior high school there, Ray Adams Junior High School, on the corner of Mason and Michigan. Okay, and he was with the 4th Infantry Division also. He also won a Silver Star, a CIB, Combat Infantry Badge, Purple Heart, and National Defense Medal. He entered the service in February of 1967. He had enlisted, and Tom lived on 2 or 3 streets south of Michigan Avenue on Nona. Next is Private First Class James Martin Fleming. He joined the U.S. Marine Corps. He was in the 3rd Marine Division. He won the National Defense Medal, a Navy ribbon. He entered the service December of 1968. He enlisted, and he was overseas less than 1 month when he died. It's a tough one, excuse me. Specialist 4th Class, David Craig Brannon of the United States Army. He was with the 1st Cavalry Division. He won the Silver Star, Combat Infantry Badge, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, Air Medal, National Defense Medal. He entered the service in September of 1968. He enlisted, and David was the highest decorated Dearborn High School Vietnam veteran, and he died at 20 years of age. Next is Bradley John Logan, United States Army. He and I played baseball at Level Good Park together. 4th Infantry Division. He was awarded, he got a C Combat Infantry Badge, Purple Heart, National Defense. He entered service May of 1969. He was drafted, here we go. He was only overseas 3 weeks before he was killed. Petty Officer 3rd Class David Ralph Kowitz, the United States Navy. He was a naval support technician out of Saigon. He received a Purple Heart, a Navy ribbon, and a National Defense Medal. He entered service in January of 1969, enlisted, and he was only overseas for 8 months before he died. Finally, Chapter 267's namesake, Captain James Linton Huard, United States Air Force. He was with the 4th 33rd Tactical Fighter Squadron, 8th Tactical Fighter Wing, and the 7th Air Force. He received his fighter pilot wings, a Purple Heart, an Air Medal, and National Defense Medal. Jim was the only person in the city of Dearborn who was listed as missing in action during the Vietnam War. 10 men, classmates. These gentlemen laid down their lives for the belief of the American dream that you all have and everyone has. If you work hard and are honest, you'll get ahead in this world. They believed in our democratic way of life. They fought for it and died for it. They were honorable men who did their duty. They are heroes of the Vietnam War. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. I'll close with a prayer for our veterans. May those who have made the ultimate sacrifice rest forever in your holy presence. Comfort the families who mourn, who are left to remember the precious lives of their loved ones. Help us to honor and support them. Let us ever be mindful of each sacrifice made on behalf of the American people by our sons, daughters, husbands, wives, mothers, and fathers, and friends. Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Garrison.
My hope is what you've heard today serves as a reminder of the constant sacrifices that have been given by veterans before us, and I also urge you to remember those veterans who are currently serving to ensure our life and liberty. Service to our country comes in many forms, and those who enter it do so for a variety of reasons. Regardless of those reasons, it is our responsibility to remember and honor their sacrifice. Teachers, we're going to dismiss the dignitaries to the James L. Huard Memorial in front of Dearborn High for the wreath ceremony. Once all the dignitaries have left, please escort your students back to class. Dignitaries, if you would, please join me in taking the wreath out to the memorial and presenting it there. We are also going to have Andrew Brown from the Dearborn High Concert Band there with us performing taps as well. Color Guard at that point will retire their colors. So dignitaries, if you would, join me out there. Thank you.
Present, Huard.